run it up to the title slide, please. Who do you go to for counsel? Do you get good counsel? When I came, Priscilla, down when my office was down below here, no windows, everything was gone out of the office. Now, when I say when I came here, I mean the first day I showed up. On the desk was a baseball cap that had two visors, one on each side, and it sat on the front. I'm their leader. Which way did they go? And the pastor, the former pastor, called me and he said, I resigned this morning and I think you should call and go down. And he said, I want to give you two pieces of advice. Beware of person A and beware of person B. And it turned out to be good counsel. I think the person that I go to first for counsel is my wife, because I know that she will not steer me wrong, and I know that she has my best interest and the church's best interest on her heart. She can be trusted because of the relationship. I'm not sure about others sometimes. It's hard to find somebody that will give good counsel. I've seen in my lifetime people get some pretty bad counsel. My father, when he was doing some things he shouldn't have been doing, he decided to go to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, whatever makes you happy, go ahead and do it. And of course, it caused the wreckage of our home. And it wasn't good counsel. I mean, counsel like that, when counsel destroys a home, it's not good counsel. And sometimes people, they give advice and maybe they have a different agenda. And we have today a story from the scriptures which is really convoluted. It says here at the title, when bad counsel is good counsel and good counsel is bad counsel. Good counsel for one might be bad counsel for another. And that's what we see in this particular passage, because we have here, we're introduced really for the first time in Samuel to Ahithophel. We've talked about him a little bit before as being Bathsheba's grandfather. Do you think if David came to his run it up one slide, please. Do you think when David was looking down from his rooftop at Bathsheba and he's deciding that he's going to commit adultery to her, do you think if he had gone to Ahithophel, her grandfather, and said, hey, I'm thinking about hooking up with this girl down here, and if things get gnarly, I'll just send her husband into battle and kill him. Do you think Ahithophel would have said that that's what he should have done? I mean, we see in this passage today, we'll get to the verse in a little bit, Ahithophel's counsel was said to be as if God had spoken. And David did this highly, highly wicked and foolish thing with Bathsheba, and it literally turned Ahithophel, who was, we didn't know it before this passage tells us, but he was David's really close counselor, and it turned him to David's fiercest enemy. And so when David actually was run out of town, as we talked about last week, Ahithophel is found to be among the conspirators with Absalom. And the reason why Absalom and Ahithophel were together in this is because they were both completely and totally embittered. And so Ahithophel is David's counselor. So now Ahithophel is going to begin to counsel against David. And he's going to join up with Absalom, and they together are going to overthrow the national leader. Now, I don't know who was worse, David or You know, if you had an election in the United States and David was the Republican and Absalom was the Democrat, who would you vote for, knowing all the things that we know about these two people? I mean, we would have to make a choice of which one was less bad. And I don't know about you, but that's the way I feel about all the elections in the last, say, 25 years. I've always voted for what I thought was the less bad. And, you know, sometimes I really had to hold my nose to vote. And here we have a situation where the son of David is overthrowing his father because his father didn't punish his brother for raping his sister. And so he is extremely embittered against his father. He hates his father. He's breaking the commandment, honor your father, that your days may be long. And we might say, how could you possibly honor a father that did such things? And so we have, at this point, at this transition in government, we have the counselor counseling death to David. So, on the other hand, as David came out of Jerusalem when he was being driven out David is driven out one day and Absalom comes in with Ahithophel the next day. This is, you know, simultaneous just about. So the previous day, David came to the summit where God was worshipped, and Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat torn and earth on his head. David said, if you go on with me, you'll be a burden, but if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I'll be your servant, O king, as I've been your father's servant in times past. So now I will be your servant, and you will defeat for me the counsel of Ahithophel. So we see that David is already on his way out, understanding that unless, well, this doesn't have a thing where you can drink out of it without pushing down, excuse me. Unless somebody goes and presents another way, Ahithophel will give counsel to David's son Absalom, and that will be good counsel and that will be bad counsel for David, but good counsel for Absalom. And it turns out that it was good counsel for Absalom. So on the other hand, we find here in the story Hushai, who is in the list. It tells all the generals and all the people, the recorders and all the people that were in the leadership in David's empire there, and then the last one in the list lists Hushai as David's friend. Now, it's hard to find a good friend. And it's interesting that this guy was not listed as a counselor, but he was listed as a friend. And as a friend, he would know pretty much everything, because you tell your friends things that you don't tell other people. Am I right, Rick? So this guy, he's an ordinary fella, but he knows David very, very well. So if he could be turned, Absalom would have somebody that could say, well, this is how he operates and this is what he does, and he's likely to do this, he's likely to go there. And so David sends him back and says, go and bow down to Absalom and say, I'm going to stay with you and I'm going to serve you. Now, of course, that would be very suspicious. Next slide, please. Let's talk about counsel. Without counsel, plans go wrong, but with many advisors, they succeed. When people are talking about what should we do, there's going to be different views on what should be done. And I think this is the problem that people don't understand about, politics, because whatever one group wants to do, it can possibly, and usually does, adversely affect somebody else. So if the law is this, we're going to give all this money to this. Let's look at an example. We're going to give money to people who want to have craft breweries. Remember that? Now everywhere you go, there's this brewery and that brewery, and everybody, they have brewery tours. They used to just have wine tours. Now they have beer tours. And the reason that all of these things are happening is because the state is subsidizing these breweries, giving these people money to build whatever it is they do to make beer and to sell beer. And therefore, the regular breweries, Budweiser and whoever, they're losing money to the craft breweries. Previously, the money came to big beer. Now it's coming to small beer that's being made in New York State. And so the law adversely affects big beer, but it gives money to small beer. And that's the case with almost everything in the government. When they decide to do this for this one, then somebody else suffers. And people run, the legislators run on bringing home the bacon. And when you bring home the bacon from one place, you have to take the pig from somewhere else. And so when they're talking about what should we do, there's different counselors with different views. And so theoretically, if you look at the whole council, then you can do the right thing. But it also should be noted that no wisdom and understanding and no counsel can avail against the Lord. And because we know something about the Bible, we also know that ultimately King David is the great king. And ultimately, Absalom is defeated, and ultimately David writes all the Psalms, the things that give us comfort when we need help. And because of the things that he went through and the grace that he found that God had given to him, it's been a blessing for 3,000 years for believers. So we know that because we know the end of the story. And here, wisdom and counsel are about to come from an embittered person, from somebody with an agenda. Next slide, please. So prior to this, the only thing we knew about Ahithophel was that he was the grandfather of Bathsheba. But now we see that the counsel of Ahithophel was as if one consulted the oracle of God. So it was considered to be equal to the priests who had the sacred dice when the Urim and Thummim that we talked about at some point in the past here in this series of lessons, where the priest could throw the dice, and if it came up two ways the same, that was a yes, and if it went two ways no, that was a no. And so the advice of Ahithophel was to be on that kind of level where God could direct them with it. And so both David and Absalom believed that way. So, next slide, please. Now, Absalom and the Israelites came to Jerusalem. Ahithophel was with him. And of course, he had this agenda to destroy David. And when Hushai the Archite said, David's friend, came to Absalom and said, "Long live the king, long live the king," he also had an agenda. And his agenda was to protect his friend. Now, the interesting thing is that he is protecting his friend, David, even though his friend brought this upon himself and was dead wrong. He hung in there even though that was the case and that was the fact. And it's hard to find a friend like that. And not only that, Hushai is really risking his life to do this because if he gets found out that that's what he's doing, off with his head. Next slide. Absalom is suspicious. Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend? And Hushai said, "No, the one who the Lord and his people and the Israelites have chosen, his I will be, and with him I will remain." Can you find theology for this? God raises up kings and takes kings down, and God is completely in control. And so therefore, I am going to be obedient to the new rulership. And I believe that Absalom believed this because he himself was loyal to no one, not even his father. And he's rebelling against his father, and within Absalom, he understands this guy, he's just trying to save his own neck, and he wants to be on the right side of whatever political fallout there's going to be here. And he's afraid that David is going to be crushed by this conspiracy between Absalom and Ahithophel. And so therefore he's coming to me and he wants to be a part. And so, okay, he should be for his friend, but he's got his own agenda. And so therefore I can use him. Would you agree that this is probably what's happening here? I mean, you're reading between the lines, and somebody could say, I don't believe that. That's fine if you don't believe that, but that's what it looks like to me. Who should I serve? Should I not serve his son? Just as I have served your father, I will serve you. Well, we know that he served his father well. We didn't see any stories in the scriptures, or there's no passages with him involved prior to this time, but he's low-key and he's under the radar. And so Absalom believes that he can use him. Any comments on that? Next slide, please. Absalom said to Ahithophel, give us your counsel. What shall we do? Now this is the same day or the next day. David's on his way out of Jerusalem, and Absalom comes into Jerusalem with Ahithophel, who's been in his own town for at least 2 or 3 years, and down there being passive aggressive and not helping out anymore, and biding his time. And so Ahithophel says, go into your father's concubines. Now, I don't need to tell you this is bad advice. David, you'll remember, had left a group of concubines. And of course, concubinage, it wasn't right that David had concubines. What if David didn't have concubines? What if David hadn't married Absalom's mother politically so that he could be connected to a neighboring king? And what if Absalom had never been born? Because if David had followed the law of the scriptures, where you leave your father and mother and cleave to your wife and be fruitful and multiply, this kid would have never been born. But David broke the marriage law, and he took this princess from the other place, and he had a daughter, Tamar, and Absalom by this woman who was not a Jew and was just a political wife. And if Tamar hadn't been born, then Amnon would not have raped her. And if David had not been guilty of his own adultery, then David could have corrected the son that raped the daughter, which he didn't, which infuriated Absalom. I mean, if you go right back to the whole thing, the whole story is it occurred because of the decisions of David. And so this very bitter man, Ahithophel, the grandfather of Bathsheba, he says, go into your father's concubines. Well, this shows that Ahithophel had no care for these women whatsoever. The only woman that he cared about was his granddaughter. Isn't that the way people are? They think, the womanizers. Nobody ever touched my daughter. I'm going to make sure my daughter's okay. But they go out and they spread their wild oats around because they don't care about anybody else's daughter. And obviously Ahithophel did not care about these poor women who were concubines to David. And so Ahithophel says to Absalom, go sleep with all these girls that are here. And then everybody will see that you're really in charge here. But really what it was underneath it all is, I'll see how he likes this. And he does it times 10 or whatever it is. This is what unforgiveness is. This is what unforgiveness does. All Israel, all the other tribes, will hear that you've made yourself odious to your father, and the hands of all who are with you will be strengthened. This is bad advice. Because when David hears about this, what's he going to do? I think just the opposite is going to happen, because the hands of David are going to be strengthened, and he's going to be furious, and he's going to do whatever he can do to avenge this. Next slide, please. Here comes some good advice, which is bad advice for David. Ahithophel said, let me choose 12,000 men, and I will set out and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he's weary and discouraged and throw him into a panic. And all the people who are with him will flee, and I'll strike down only the king. I will personally kill him myself if you give me these 12,000 people. There's 12 tribes. Give me 1,000 from each tribe should be enough. But I'm not going to kill anybody else. I'm going to just go and get that SOB. Is this good military advice? I would have to say it is. For Absalom, it's not good advice for David. I'll get him tonight. It'll be a bloodless war. We'll just take out Saddam Hussein, and then everything will be okay. And I will do it personally. You see how you can't just read these stories, go verse to verse to verse, and just blah, 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 blah. They don't make sense that way. Let me choose 12,000 men. This sounds like what the devil does. He says, I'll come upon them when they're weary and discouraged and throw them into a panic. That's the work of the devil. The word Satan means adversary. He's going to go after David when he's at his weakest point. He's been expelled from the city, and he's on the edge of the Jordan. He's in the wilderness. He's heading back the way that the children of Israel came into the promised land, and he doesn't have much food, and he doesn't have much support in the country, and people aren't going to be feeding them as they go, although some people did. I'll get him tonight. And next slide, please. And I will bring all the people back to you as a bride comes home to her husband. Everybody will be so happy. There'll be no war. You'll be reunited to those people that went with him, and there'll be a big party, and we'll have fatted calf and wine, and everything will be all right, and your new kingdom will be established, because the only thing that's in the way is this man David. But you know what the problem is? This man David, God still loved, even though he was a terrible person. all the people will be at peace. Scriptures say in one place, woe to those that say peace, peace, when there is no peace. I'll just take the life of the king and everything will be all right. Well, Absalom thinks that's a good idea. Next slide, please. Absalom said, call Hushai, the Archite. Let's hear what he has to say. Hushai came to Absalom and said, this is what Ahithophel has said. Shall we do as he advises? If not, tell us. And Hushai said to Absalom, this time the counsel of Ahithophel has given is not good. First, we see that in the initial discussion, Hushai isn't in the room. But he's just come to the king that day, and so the king starts to think, well, this guy knows David pretty well, so let's see if, what he can add, and, let's see if he's in agreement with this. I wonder how Ahithophel thought about this. He's previously been acknowledged by both David and Absalom as if it's the voice of God. But his credibility has been ruined a little bit because everybody knows that the voice of God would not be, go rape the wives of the king. So Absalom understands that, this really wasn't a good advice. And he just got done doing that afternoon. I don't know how he expected that he would have God's blessing on all of this. And Hushai said, the advice is not good, and here's why. Next slide, please. Your father and his men are warriors, and they are enraged like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. Now, that's an expression that's really old, and if you know anything about bears, if there's a group of bears, you don't mess with the little ones because the mother will have no mercy and will rip you to pieces. These people that you're talking about, going in amongst them and just killing David, it ain't going to happen. Besides, your father is an expert in war. He will not spend the night with the troops. Is there precedent for this statement? Remember we talked about the cave of Adullam, and Saul came in the cave, and he's hiding in different caves as he's being chased around as a younger person. He didn't spend his night with the troops, and so Hushai knows that that's not David's MO. And so if you go down there and you go amongst these bears that are really angry about their kids, and then you get down there and they will fight you and David won't even be there, and so this is not a good plan. Even now he's hidden himself in one of the pits or in some other place. And when some of the troops fall at the first attack, whoever hears will say, there's been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom. Is this good advice? You might say it is. You might say it's the other side of the coin. But the thing about if they follow this, it actually allows David to escape. If Ahithophel goes down and tries to do his plan, probably a greater chance of success. History tells us that when the Union Army defeated Robert E. Lee at Gettysburg, General Meade was severely criticized for not chasing the Confederates all the way back to Virginia. He won the battle in Gettysburg, and if you look at the newspaper in Canandaigua in July of 1863, there's a list about that long of people that were killed in Canandaigua, in the Canandaigua vicinity, in the Battle of Gettysburg. And yet, Meade did not follow and completely crush. And so Ahithophel is saying, I'm going to just go kill the king, there won't be any war. And Hushai says, no, you're going to need a huge army to accomplish this. But it did give David the chance to escape, and we'll see that he went across the Jordan and got out of town. Next verse. Then, even the valiant warrior, that's Absalom's valiant warrior, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will utterly melt with fear, and all Israel knows that your father is a warrior, and that those who are with him are valiant warriors. Your lion is going to be subdued. You're going to look like an idiot. Because historically, David won all these battles up to this point. You know, when he was young and was being chased by Saul and doing all the exploits that he did earlier. And Hushai just basically reminds Absalom of all of these things. Next slide, please, with the map. My counsel is that all Israel be gathered to you from Dan to Beersheba. Now, throughout the scriptures, when it says Dan to Beersheba, Dan is the northernmost part, or northeasternmost part, and Beersheba is down right below Judah. You can't really see it too well on the map, but the whole length of the land. Get some people from the whole length of the land, get your army together, and then chase him down. There's only one problem, that historically the 10 tribes were not able to conquer David ever previously. And he says, you go to the battle in person. Now that is about the worst advice I think that could possibly be given. You go out in person. Ahithophel says, I'm going to be the warrior, and I'm going to be the one that delivers, and there'll be real peace, and I'll just get the one guy. And Hushai says, no, you're going to need the army from the whole country, and that you yourself should personally lead the battle. Two completely different, conflicting things. But what he did is he appealed to the pride in Absalom. You will be the leader, you will be the victor, and everybody will follow you, and everything will be cool. Who do you get your advice from? It's not that easy, is it? I mean, when you really examine who the counselor should be. Next slide, please. We shall come upon him in whatever place he may be found, and we will light upon him as the dew falls on the ground, and he will not survive, nor will any of those who are with him. They're all traitors. You know, I don't know about you, but I hate the fall dew because it means the summer is over. I like it when I get up in July and there's no dew on the ground. Of course, the dew is necessary. But it covers everything indiscriminately. It doesn't care where it goes. We'll get them all. But it's a deceitful counsel for Absalom. Next slide. I love this one. You see the metaphor? We got the bear robbed of the cubs, and then we got the cowardly lion. And now we've got the metaphor of the walled city that protects David. If he withdraws into a city, all Israel will bring ropes to that city and will drag it into the valley until not even a pebble is to be found there. If anybody protects him, we will level that city. We'll take the city on the hill and we'll fill in the valley and make a road there. He's appealing to the pride of Absalom. Next slide. Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel, for the Lord had ordained to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that the Lord might bring ruin on Absalom. All of this happened. All this wickedness, all of these deceitful things, and all of these lies, and all of these people that have mixed motives, and all of that happened so that God could punish Absalom. David gets the get out of jail free pass. Because David's heart is different than Absalom's heart. Absalom's heart is completely and totally bitter. David's heart is completely and totally repentant. Jesus said, "It would be better for that man had he not been born." Speaking of Judas. It would have been better for the whole history of the world if David had not married that princess and became father of Absalom and Tamar. The whole world would be different if he hadn't married all those wives, if he didn't harbor all those concubines, if he just kept with his one wife. You know who's missing in this story? Bathsheba. She's on the run with David. Ahithophel says, "I'll just kill him." He doesn't want to mess with his grandchildren by Bathsheba. He doesn't want to harm his granddaughter. So who gave the best counsel? It depends on who was being counseled. Now, so often people go to somebody for counsel who will agree with what they want to do. But I'll tell you what, you shouldn't agree when somebody says, "I want to take that woman that I see down there and commit adultery with her." We shouldn't look for a counselor that will agree to that. We should look to a counselor that understands the law of God. And we should look to a counselor that can understand if you break the law of God, this is what's going to happen to you. If you don't honor your father, yeah, but he was an SOB. Well, you still have to honor him. I don't like that. Do you? You should have one wife. You should leave your father and mother and have one wife. Yeah, but I'm a king. I want to have 100 wives. Absalom. I'm going to kill that guy. He allowed my brother to rape my sister. But Absalom had already killed Amnon. The whole story is, really, when you get right down to it, the whole story is about unforgiveness and whether the person repented or not. Repent and be baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Have a heart that when you do the wrong thing, that you say that you admit it. And David did, but Absalom did not. And it was a big mistake for Absalom to go into battle. He followed Hushai's advice. Okay, next slide, please. Where do you get your counsel from? Can counsel be trusted? How do you know which politician to support? Did God give up on David? Will God give up on you? How did the wrong to Bathsheba result in the wrong done to the concubines? Okay, we'll field a couple of comments if you have them. Questions?
I guess it's more of a comment. It's when I look at this whole story, I think the thing that impresses me the most is the devastating nature of sin. It reminds me of, oddly, crabgrass. Crabgrass grows undetected. It mimics other grasses, so it stays hidden, and it sends out runners, and the runners have deep roots, and it's impossible to get rid of. And it just has, I mean, there was a time when I thought, maybe I'll just plant crabgrass. But as an overview, looking at all this, sin is, fear God. Fear God. Hate evil. Because you're not going to win.
In all of this, does anybody want to share how there was an unintended consequence for something that you or someone may have done in the past, and how you might have been shocked with the consequence of it? Anybody dare say any such thing? Yeah, I don't blame you. All right. Be careful who you take counsel from. Make sure that they have your best interest at heart. I was talking a couple days ago, I was at my mechanics and I ran into the new pastor at Zion. He's been there since April. And I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he said, "Oh yeah, pretty good. A bunch of people have come back." And I said, "Beware of